there's now a question here. It's like, can you apply this framework to product development and early stage entrepreneurship? And I think the answer is absolutely. I'm going to talk about product development, Rita, and I'll let you talk about entrepreneurship. And what I'll talk about in product development is I actually just posted this morning the story of Minidisc and Sony, and
Ron, you should probably tell them a little bit about yourself now that I'm thinking.
Oh, yeah,
because I don't think I did a very good job introducing you.
Well, thank you, Rita. I grew up at Sony, so I spent probably about half of my career at Sony, in various roles, but ultimately.
Well, you were there when it really grew, right? I mean, you were there.
I was there, yeah. When I joined Sony, it was about $1 billion company. When I left, it was about a $30 billion company. Which was a fantastic ride. It's still many of my closest friends are still Sony people in the Sony world. So it was a great ride, and I got to do a lot of things that if a company wasn't growing that fast, I probably wouldn't have got to do. And one of them was run the personal mobile products company. So back in the day, that was the Walkman company. And Minidisc was one of the products. And I if you go to my LinkedIn, you'll see a little story on Minidisc and kind of what happened there. But the question is, can you apply this framework to product development? So beyond Sony, I then went out into retail. I was at Best Buy during one of their transformations, which is really exciting. And I've also done a lot of work in private equity. With a number of transformations in private equity, and some very successful and some not so successful, because that's how the world goes. I want to talk about, from a product development standpoint, there are a couple of really interesting ways to think about this. So when I first got into product on the Sony side, the compact disc was still a really big thing, right? And it was going to be eventually replaced by pure digital audio. And it was very, very clear to the music industry, it was very, very clear to Sony that this was going to happen. But the question becomes, how do you prepare for that? And how do you truly think through that? The Minidisc article touches on some of these things. So those of you who are older than Flaminia, God bless you, Flaminia, probably never owned a CD player, understand
I never did.
The digitization of audio was a terrifying thing for the music industry, because it meant you could now, once it's ones and zeros, it's quite easy to photocopy a CD. So the industry spent a lot of time trying to constrain the free movement of music, while the electronics industry wanted to sell devices that could copy and replicate music. And it was very, very clear to see that there was a point at which where broadband was going to get fast enough, the internet was going to get fast enough, that truly downloading and streaming music was going to happen. But it wasn't clear as when that point was or what the business model was. Throughout the 90s, there was a huge number of failed attempts to control music. One was called the Secure Digital Music Initiative. If you ever want to have your head explode, go to Wikipedia and read about that one. I lived through that for about 5 years. Which essentially was an industry trying to put a digital wrapper around everything in the world. And of course, that never worked. And ultimately, the people who solved this problem were not in the music industry, and were, in fact, not in the portable music device industry. And it was a little fruit company called Apple that came up with this thing called an iPod and Apple Music. And they were able to do it because they, from my perspective, they were free of the constraints of thought and free of the constraints of the conflicts within the music and electronics industry. If you think about Sony actually owned both pieces. They owned the biggest record company in the world and the biggest electronics company in the world, and we could not talk to each other. I actually proposed a product called Music Station in Japan, which almost got me fired, that said we can combine these things and make digital recordings and sell them. And I proposed that in 1999. And you guys know that the iPod wasn't even introduced until 4 or 5 years later.